Look, Jodi Rueger from Jodi Rueger Air Shows. Thanks for joining us on Air Sports News.
Great to be here.
Where are you, Jodi? Where are you right now?
I'm in Redmond, Oregon. So I've got a little air park here that we live at Klein Falls. So we're hosting here today.
So I was looking at some of your footage, the Mustang, this 3/4 scale Mustang, and especially the noise of the engine you posted last week. Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, we're very excited about it. It just did its very first engine runs, and we're hoping to have it flying early in the new year. But there'll be a lot of test flying to do before it's ready to really see what it's capable of.
So before we find out a little bit more about that, tell me what else you've got there in the air park. You've got the pits.
Yeah, we've got the pits. It's a little bit torn apart right now. I've got somebody coming down to recover the wings with me and hopefully just pound it out really quick in about a week. So we're going to be doing a lot of test flying in the next couple months. And we've got another Wolf Pits in the making, and we're babysitting a Pitts S111B until it sells. So lots of bits and pieces of Pittses everywhere.
And what's happening with air shows for you at the moment?
Right now, there's not a whole lot going on. 2020, I had 13 shows booked, all of them canceled. Yeah. A lot of them pushed back a year. So we are still talking about doing the same shows for this season, provided everything turns out well. There's a vaccine on the horizon, so we're keeping our fingers crossed. We're going to have virtual ICAST next week, and we'll know a little bit more then, hopefully.
So tell me a bit more about this Mustang. How did this come about?
That was a project a friend of mine had been working on for a little while. He found one and he had been interested in them for a while. He was my husband's crew chief for Reno for a couple seasons. And so that's where the Thunder Mustang really caught Fred's eye. When he found one that he could get a hold of, he jumped on it. And he was kind of debating between, Sean was already flying a plane in sport class. He's one of the instructors there. And that's my husband. So I had been talking about racing at Reno. I had done Formula One ground school, and when I did my Formula One ground school, I got my 737 ground school and my upgrade the exact same week. So I had to drop it. So I never actually did get to race. And he said, "Hey, do you want to race this one?" And he told me what the deal was with it, and I was really interested. He told me he's looking for corporate sponsorship with the plane. He wants it to kind of pay for itself. And I said, well, if you want a plane to pay for itself, you've got to do more than one event per year. It's like, why don't we, mix it into the air show gig and see if we can book it some shows. And then as we got talking about these shows, we realized, okay, Reno's going to cost a lot of money. Air shows are going to make money. You've got a lot more events, some of them closer to home, and it ended up just being a really good business model. So we're going to see if it takes off.
Fantastic. Takes off. I like the pun. Very good. Very good. So tell me, how did air shows begin for you, Jodi? When did it start?
Well, I decided I want to be a pilot pretty young. I wasn't really sure. I never liked going the beaten path. So airline flying wasn't my main goal. I thought that maybe I'd be a corporate pilot and go on vacations with rich people that I flew wherever. I thought that sounded cool. And then one day I was sitting and watching the Red Bull Air races on TV with my dad when he dropped me off at the flight college that I went to. And I was like, man, that looks really cool. And I really was too afraid to admit that I wanted to do it because it seemed so far-fetched. And kind of very low-key over the next couple years, I started to tell people, like, I think it'd be really cool to do that. Right. And looked at what it would take to get qualified. Because at that point, I was a private pilot with like 60 hours right. when it really started to inspire me. So I looked through and I found out, okay, the criteria at the time was you need to be top 50% in the world competition in aerobatics and unlimited and have a surface level air show waiver. So when I moved to BC, I started instructing there and I found a school that had aerobatic planes. And I got checked out on them. I kind of inadvertently became a tailwheel instructor through it because a lot of aerobatic planes are also tail draggers, and I really took to it, really loved that. And my tail dragger instructor that took me in, his son was an unlimited competitor. So he became my aerobatic instructor, and my coach, and they brought me to my first aerobatic competition in Ephrata, Washington, which is actually where I met my husband.
Right. What year was that?
That's where I met my husband.
When was that? When?
Oh, that was in 2004.
Right.
Yeah, so that was my very first time going to it. I had maybe like 300 hours under my belt, and I had this 4-road super decathlon, and the aerobatic community just kind of took me in, and my airplane kind of got stolen. That's a longer story, but the short version is the whole community came together and found me a different airplane that I could borrow. And it was a US airplane. At the time, I only had my Canadian license, so I needed a safety pilot. And my safety pilot was an airshow performer named Will Allen. And I ended up winning my first contest by a pretty healthy margin and really impressed my safety pilot. And he saw what I was doing for the aerobatic club that I eventually took over and became president. And I had all these social events going for them. So he said, we really need that for our airshow team. Would you crew for me? And that's where I started to learn the ropes with the airshow stuff and really get inspired to do it. I wasn't sure that I was going to like it as much as competitions, but it's been a lot of fun.
Amazing. And what about the competitions? Are you still involved?
Yeah, as much as I can be. That's part of the reason I really want the Pitts flying. The Pitts isn't as good of an airshow plane because everybody has one.
Right.
When it comes to trying to find a really capable aerobatic plane that's on a budget, the Pitts, you can't beat it. So there's a lot of competition out there, and a lot of them have the 2-seat version, so they can do meter rides. So my little single-seat Pitts is a little bit less impressive compared to Sean Tucker or Brent Handy. And the Thunder Mustang just has some real ramp presence, a lot of noise. So the Pitts will be primarily a competition plane, and then some of the smaller shows kind of close to home.
All right. And so for the end of this year, do you think you're going to get the Mustang flying and up in the air, did you say?
We'll probably have it early January. It'll be flying. We're going to do a few more engine runs on the ground. There's a lot of stuff to set up because the engine's been sitting for so long. So to just make sure everything's really working well before we try and take to the air with it.
And talking about the competition scene, how do you feel about the potential of what was the Red Bull Air Race coming back with this Far Eastern investors?
Yeah, I heard rumors about it, and I thought that was really exciting. So I've got my fingers crossed. And maybe by the time they come back, they'll be qualified to try out.
Fantastic. And the Mustang, how many of these are actually in operation right now?
Very few. So there was only 37 kits ever made. I think 5 of them have been written off already, and not all the rest of them are flying. So it's a pretty rare airplane. A lot of the heat that I've been getting on social media is the reputation for the firewall forward. They're prone to a lot of failure modes because it is an automotive conversion. So that engine is also very rare. They tried very hard to make this as close as possible to an actual P51. It's a 3/4 scale P51. And to get that V12 and the exhaust and the noise, they had to go with the Falconer engine. So it is belt driven. And there's a lot of failure modes. If anything on that belt goes, the oil pump is also connected to it. So we've got a really strict maintenance program in place. And that's part of the reason it's going to take so long to get it flying is we're going to be very careful. We're going to be beefing up a lot of the hardware as well and just taking it slow.
I noticed on the comments on the Facebook post, a lot of people were saying, careful.
Yeah. One of the owner's dad looked at, he's like, man, there is no love for that Thunder Mustang.
Oh, amazing. And I really like the posts. You've been doing quite a bit of education as well. They're showing different maneuvers with loops and other things as well, but also physics. You've been getting into the physics of things, especially with the water and the center of gravity and the G-force on it. That's quite interesting stuff. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that's something like that. The thing that inspired me there was a lot of people in the comment section don't understand what's going on. So they'll tell me, oh, your hair didn't fly around, so you're obviously doing this in a simulator. And I'm like, man, I did like 5 dry runs because I was so afraid of getting those avionics wet. So to me, like that was a really cool thing that I did. And it bothered me when people thought I was faking it. So I figured, okay, instead of, you don't need to get mad about that, but explain it like I'm 5. Take it and scale it back to a way that's digestible to the average person. And a lot of air shows have started to take an approach where they're really connecting STEM and trying to make this a family event. So it really just kind of went hand in hand, explaining what's going on out there and how it's not really scary. Like, my family thought I was absolutely insane when I started flying air shows or aerobatics. So part of the thing that inspired the water pour in the barrel roll was to show how gentle it can be, because I've been teaching aerobatics for 7 years and I've never had a single puber.
Right.
And so I think if you have a really skilled pilot, you can be in that position where you have a really smooth ride. You can keep things positive, keep them coordinated, keep them gentle. I call it, granny loop. I'm not going to do what I would do in a competition with a first-time passenger. And then that kind of evolved to people going, well, you don't look like you're actually upside down. So trying to explain how that works in a way that is relatable. So it's kind of become a fun side project for me. I've got a couple more ideas, but I need to have the right airplane to play with to really take it a little bit further.
That's really nice to hear. I was at an event 2 years ago, an event in Europe, and there was a glider pilot, and he wanted to take me up. He was aerobatic, and he wanted to really show me what he could do. Wow. I wish he would do granny rolls with me as what he was doing that time.
It's not fun to clean an airplane. No. And if a parachute gets puke on it, it smells like that for life, no matter how well you clean it out. My first parachute, I couldn't afford very much, so I had this pre-owned one. Yeah. And I always had to take the one that smelled like puke and give the clean one to my passenger, and I wore that for years, and I just begrudged whoever sold it to me for that whole time over the smell.
Have you done any parachute jumps outside of your job, outside of your work? Have you done any fun skydives?
Yeah, I've done one skydive. I want to do more. I did scare myself into taking some proper bailout training. I had an incident where I was at a competition training camp when I was a low-time aerobatic pilot. And when I was going knife edge to inverted, my door got sucked outside the plane and was folded in half and fluttering rather violently in the airflow. So I managed to slow the plane down and pull the door back inside and land it. But when I got on the ground, the guys came up and they're like, "Oh yeah, your door's really messed up." And they said, if this had come off and hit your tail, you would have been bailing out. And I was like, no, I wouldn't have. That's the problem. So I went and took bailout training. I made a promise to myself that I would do at least one jump before the next time I wore my emergency chute, and treat it as training. My whole mindset was getting out of the plane without hesitating. As quickly as possible and not getting hung up in the doorway, because I think that's the hardest part of any bailout. And from there, I put on a bailout ground school for my aerobatic club, because I realized, these are the guys that trained me and or that I just interact with every day. And it might not be on everybody's radar. So if I need this training, then more people probably do too. Can
you tell me a bit about the bailout training? What it encompassed? What do you do?
Sorry, the audio is fading a little bit.
On the bailout training, how was it? What did it consist of?
So for me, it was a tandem jump, and then we got a master Rueger to come out to the aerobatic club. We've got enough members to represent all of the most average airplanes. So we had an extra, an Eagle, and a Citabria to kind of cover your biplane, grassroots, and your unlimited performers. And we had him try on a different parachute for each person, and some of them, it was interesting, like the Citabria, the seat pack actually worked better in the back seat, and the backpack would work better in the front seat. So it actually depended a little bit on where you were sitting in each airplane as to what you wanted to use. And we pulled some of the chutes. We got to see how you steer them. We tried static line jumps. So they had me sitting in the plane, and I jumped out, and they dragged me across the grass until my chute pulled itself to simulate, once you get past the tail, at that point, that's when you want the parachute to deploy, and that's as quick and safe as possible if you're willing to have that line in the way, and make sure you don't forget to take it off when you're jumping out of the plane to go grab gas later. So there's a lot of stuff like that. It was like a day where we had a big ground school from him. He talked us through the difference between all the chutes, how to pack them properly, why we repack them as often as we do, and how to store them properly. Because a lot of us would just throw it in our car and not realize there's hundreds of elastics in there that are temperature sensitive. And you don't want to be melting those in your trunk in a hot summer day. So stuff like that. It was a lot of really good information.
That's really cool stuff, really interesting stuff. How's it been for you this year? How have you coped with yourself and your family? It's very different for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting year for me. I got married in February, and my husband's American. So I was visiting in March when they announced that they were closing the border. They were going to lay off 80% of the pilots at my company. So I was working for an airline flying a 737. And I only had 2.5 years of seniority in, so I was not in a good position. And I wanted to eventually one day move down here and start an airline here, but it bumped that time span up years for me. And so basically our lawyer said, if you don't leave the US, we can process your immigration a lot quicker. And that ended up being a really good call because it's the only type of immigration they are currently processing, but it's taking a lot longer. So I've been a trophy wife instead of a career pilot, and I've been taking ground school since I was 12. This is the first summer I ever had to myself since I was 12, because I was always pursuing scholarships and just trying to make what seemed impossible happen for myself. So I had to learn to enjoy the time off. I certainly wasn't used to it. And I've been actually working in the shop on the Thunder Mustang to try and get experience towards, A&P stuff down the road, make sure I'm a little bit more self-sufficient when it comes to just taking care of my planes.
And whereabouts in Canada are you from originally? Where in Canada?
Originally, London, Ontario. So a lot of my family is back there. And the other hard part about this all is I have a niece that just turned 1 last week. So, being away is definitely tough. And I'm really hoping the border opens up pretty soon and I'll be able to go back and see them. But I think a lot of people are going to be locked down for the holidays anyway and playing it safe. So if there was ever a year to do it, this is probably the one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been great to catch up with you, Jodi. It was really good chat, actually. Some really good information there. Really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for joining us. And I hope you have a great holiday season.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks for having me.